Hi people, and welcome to your lesson on how to include activating prior knowledge in your EDI lesson. So activating prior knowledge, we sometimes call it APK for short, but that's actually a little bit harder to say than just activating prior knowledge. Much easier to write though. So let's have a look at what it is. The first thing we're going to have a look at is where it is more detailed explained in the Hollingsworth and Ybarra book. I'll do that for every section. So where the pages that are most relevant for activating prior knowledge in the EDI book are pages 90 to 94. And it's quite dense. It goes into quite a lot of detail. It's got quite a lot of theory behind it. And I do find it very useful. What I'm trying to do here is just to give you an overall idea, and then you can use those pages to deepen and enrich your knowledge of activating prior knowledge. Okay, so for each section, I'm going to try and explain to you the brain science behind why we do what we're doing. I think it's just as important for us as adults to understand why we're bothering as it is for the kids. If you remember, there's a section, and we'll get to this later, a section in the EDI lesson where we talk about the relevancy of what we're teaching them. Well, this is the relevancy section for you. Why are we doing this? Okay, so the reason that we activate prior knowledge is Ybarra and Hollingsworth put it much better in a much more detailed way, but the way that I put it is new knowledge needs old knowledge in the brain to stick to. So by activating prior knowledge, you are giving the new knowledge something to adhere to in the brain. And if you don't, there's a high chance that for some of our kids, that knowledge just bounces straight back out again because it had nothing to hold on to. So that is why we activate prior knowledge, to try and give the knowledge something to stick to in the kid's brain. So there are two ways to APK. See, I told you. Universal experience is the first one. Now, we most often use this at the beginning of a unit when there are no previously taught skills to link this next skill or piece of knowledge to. So in this case, it was at the start of a unit on persuasive writing, and no previous stuff had been taught on persuasive writing. So the teachers made a decision to activate prior knowledge using a universal experience. And what that means is just something that all the kids will have experienced in their lifetime that has something to do with what they're teaching that day. So in this case, we're talking about persuasion. And we want the kids to realise that, they often do a lot of persuading. Kids are always trying to persuade. So what she does is she talks about how we often need to get people to agree with us. Sometimes we might want our younger sister or sibling to watch something on TV and they want to watch something else. So we're going to have to talk them into it. We do this kind of thing all the time in life. So the teacher would explain that to the kids, and then there would be a think, pair, share, which is one of the engagement norms that we use, and that's where you just get the kids in whatever structured way you want to do it. A's talk to B's, B's tell A's, to talk about a time in their lives where they have had to use their skills to talk somebody into it, to convince them to do what they wanted. So that's activating prior knowledge via universal experience. And the other important point I need to make out is this here: you must make the connection for them. What brain science tells us is that even though it might seem obvious to us, if we don't make that connection, some kids' brains won't do it for them. So having talked about the last time you had to talk somebody into getting your own way, you now say, today we're going to learn about writing techniques for talking people into it. Okay, and that's the connection that's now made that nice link between what they already know and what they are about to learn. Okay, so that's activating prior knowledge via universal experience. The second way we can do it is to link to things that you have already taught. So if that lesson had have come halfway through the persuasive writing unit, you might have been able to talk about how we all know what persuasive is, and we've learnt two techniques of how to persuade through the use of descriptive adverbs and adjectives, and through rhetorical questions. And today we're going to learn another persuasive technique called hyperbole. So that's probably where you would go with that one if you were linking it via things already taught. But let's have a look at a maths example. So the lesson objective is to find the composite the area of composite shapes, including circles. Now, clearly, this stuff that you see on the screen has already been taught by the maths teacher. So he's just putting it up there and saying, we already know this stuff. And in fact, rather than saying, remember, I would probably say, so guys, you already know that, because it's a little bit, it's quite encouraging for them to hear that, but this is fine. This is the stuff they already know. Draw that to their attention, and then the maths teacher makes the connection. We'll be using this knowledge today to help us find the area of a composite circle. So activated prior knowledge via a skill that they already know, or a skill or skills, and then making the connection between that and what they are doing today. So that's nicely done. Now, there are things that go wrong when we are activating prior knowledge. There's common errors, if you like. So one of the things that go wrong is that teachers start teaching. So what they say is, don't use any of your new language in your activating prior knowledge. So if you're going to teach them to persuade, you'll notice in the very first example, if you're going to teach them to persuade, you wouldn't be teaching them what persuade means in your activating prior knowledge. And in fact, you'd probably want to avoid that vocabulary altogether for something a lot more common. So in the first example, the teacher used talking them into it instead of persuade, because she hasn't yet introduced that type of language. That's what's going to come in the lesson. So don't start teaching new content during the activating prior knowledge. You are just giving them something to stick their new knowledge to that they already have in their brain. And the other common mistake, which is also made on this slide, is that teachers just forget to make the connection. So always remember to make the connection. This gives a couple of vocab words. They're actually part of the lesson anyway, so you wouldn't be doing that in activating prior knowledge because it's new vocab, or it's vocab that's going to be used in a new way. So what should have happened in there is they should have just said, we all know what surveys are. We've all had to take lots of surveys in our life. This was if they were doing universal experience of activating prior knowledge. So they could have said, we all know what surveys are. We've all had to take them in our lives. Have a chat to the person next to you about a survey you've done recently. And let's face it, our students shouldn't have any problem identifying a survey that they have done recently. They might even want to talk about why we do surveys. And then you make the connection that today we're going to be learning about some things, some elements, some factors that make survey results either very trustworthy or not as trustworthy as you might think. So that is just a couple of common errors that go wrong. You start to teach before you actually, you start to teach in your prior knowledge. Don't do that. Nothing new in activating prior knowledge. It's prior knowledge. And make sure you make the connection to the actual learning that day. Okay, so that, in a nutshell, people, is activating prior knowledge the EI way. Go and check out the pages 90 to 94 in the Explicit Direct Instruction book, because they've got a lot more detail in there that I think you will find useful. Okay, so that's it for this section.